Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/PettyRevenge, where people get small wins on others and the stories are so satisfying, not to mention hilarious. And in today's episode, OP's Karen neighbor goes to war against her and she ends up homeless. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories, hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your Reddit post to this email right here. We're diving in. I'm a 50-year-old male at Walmart, and I hear a girl worker who's in her 20s nicely say, "Excuse me, ladies." I then look to see two entitled middle-aged women talking in front of the doors that the workers use to restock the store. The entitled Karen then looks at the worker like she was royalty, being interrupted by a filthy peasant. The worker, with her empty supply cart, again tells the entitled bees that she needs to get through. Again, the entitled woman blows her off with pursed lips and a dirty look saying, "I'm not moving for you." Now, I have a particular sensitivity to people mistreating workers, and these bees have disrupted my delicate sensibilities. So I decide to get some petty revenge. I walk past the entitled Karens, snagging one of the carts full of groceries, and I take off. It takes a moment for them to notice before they pursue me, and boy did they pursue me. I quickly traverse the back aisle, turn the corner towards the front of the store, and one of the entitled women tried to pull the cart away from me, but I make it all the way to the front of the store before letting go. I make a clean getaway and go back to get my cart. Next to the restock doors is the other woman's cart. Now, before you call me the a-hole, I'm fully aware, but these people need to be taught a lesson, and I'm just the one compelled to step up. I grab the other cart and head off to the camping section. I take the cold stuff from the cart because I needed milk and eggs anyway, so bonus. Later, I did feel bad that some Walmart worker would have to restock the cart, and when I got back, the cart was gone. This happened like a year ago, and I didn't think much about it. But the other day, I was at a restaurant with my extended family, and one of the waitresses kept looking at me. It took me a while to put it together. And when she walked past, I said, "Hey, didn't you used to work at Walmart?" Hearing me say that, she got excited, and she exclaimed that she thought it was me. She then filled me in on the aftermath. So of course, the ladies complained to the manager that some guy tried to steal their stuff for no reason. The manager figured there was more to the story. Both the women wanted the manager to find me and have me arrested. The worker girl told her what really happened, and it's since become a store folklore. I said to her that was an a-hole thing to do, and she said, "You're not an a-hole, you are a legend." You know what, guys, OP might have thought he was the a-hole in that situation, but honestly, sometimes you have to be the bigger jerk to teach jerky people a lesson, and those Karens can consider the time they have to spend redoing their shopping as the price they have to pay for messing with an employee who was just trying to do her job. So many moons ago, I worked at a local big box store as a department manager. I knew a lot of the people who worked there because it's a small town, so most of us went there to work after graduating high school. A very old friend started working there too, and we instantly clicked again. I'll just call her Cher for this post. So Cher's fiance worked there too, so we all became pretty close. We would take breaks and lunches together, and we would help each other out if needed. I thought we were all good friends, but little did I know that wasn't the case. After a while, Cher is actively planning out her wedding. The bachelorette party comes up, and she wants to go to Atlantic City for the weekend. I thought that was a great idea, and I had never been there before. So I offered to book a room in a nice hotel. So the next day, I booked it and told her it was all set up. Now, during this time, my husband and I were having some issues. I thought to talk to her about it because I thought I could trust her. Barely a week after I made the reservations, I received a text from her that wasn't meant for me. I don't remember the exact words, but she basically called me pathetic and annoying, and she used my name in the text. She was referring to my marital problems, so I sit down for a minute and responded that I think she meant to text that to someone else. She then makes some lame excuse about autocorrect or something. I knew it was BS. Fast forward a month, the bachelorette party's almost here. Everybody's so excited to spend the weekend in a nice hotel on my dime. I was excited too, but I was excited for a different reason. You see, after I got that text, I canceled the reservations and I didn't mention it. I waited until it was too late for them to get another room. When I did drop the bomb, she wasn't impressed. I also said something petty along the lines of, "An annoying pathetic person is not paying for your stupid weekend. F off." They still went, but they had to sneak into their fiance's hotel room and fit 10 people in a double queen. They had a crappy time, and I used that money to get a new tattoo that weekend instead. Money well spent. It was worth it for me. Yeah guys, I think if I were in OP's shoes, I wouldn't have even told her. I would have just pulled the, "Oh guys, I'm coming down with a cold, so go without me," the night before, and let them figure out my little surprise. As for all who are wondering about the aftermath at work, OP says she transferred departments and she quit 3 months later. Oh, and OP does share a picture of her tattoo. And honestly guys, spending money on anything would be better than spending money on a friend who talks crap behind your back. And that's the truth. This situation took place years ago, at the house I rented with my then preschoolers. I was extremely fortunate to rent a house where the rent was very reasonable and I had an amazing landlord. The owner of the house next door was an older, very cantankerous and rude woman and her totally obnoxious son. They had an older, very sweet and gentle dog who I'll name Tim. Tim was very frequently allowed to wander free, and he was an almost daily visitor to our home because he loved us and vice versa. I would always walk him back to their own yard because I was scared to death that he'd be hit by a car. Not that his neglectful, nasty owners ever appreciated this, mind you. Tim had gastro issues, and he had trouble controlling his bowels, that poor old guy, which were very loose. Because he frequently visited us, he would often lose control and leave a huge pile of doggy diarrhea smack dab on the walkway right in front of our steps, which would lead to either me or my kids accidentally stepping in it on the way out, which caused a few incidents of either my kids being late to school or me being late getting off to work. Now, to be clear, I never got angry at the poor pup because it wasn't his fault. Each and every time, I would speak to the neighbors, requesting they please keep Tim on their property to prevent this from happening. But each time I did, the old lady would scream at me, or the son would laugh and make very rude remarks telling me off. So cue the petty revenge. The next time I found yet another huge pile of dog poop in front of my steps, I didn't bother saying anything to the neighbors. I just picked it up with a shovel, walked it over to the neighbor's house when they weren't home, and proceeded to deposit the poop not just in the same spot there, but I took it a step further and dumped it right in front of their door. I did this 3 times. I could hear the glorious screams of surprise and disgust from both the old lady and her son from my house. Now, before anyone says anything, I anticipated those a-holes probably taking it out on poor Tim. And already being concerned about neglect, I contacted a friend who was the consulting vet for the local animal rescue shelter, alerting them of the situation. They told me to document and take photos and videos, which I did. Anyway, the neighbors finally realized it was me that was gifting them back the dog poop. And the old lady shows up at my front door one day, and boy was she livid. She was screaming at me. I had kept my video camera on a table pointing towards the front steps in anticipation of this happening so I could record it, and she did not disappoint. The woman was screaming and cursing, while I calmly responded and requested she leave the property or I would call police. She didn't, and continued to insult and threaten me and my kids. Let me add that while this was going on, Tim was loose. So I called the police and my vet friend. Both showed up within 30 minutes, and I proceeded to show them what I just recorded. Plus, poor Tim was crying on the neighbor's front steps to be let in, and the neighbors refused. It's at that point, the police and my vet friend decided that Tim needed to be rescued, and the police officer goes over to inform the neighbors, while my vet friend leashes Tim, who came over to me in my front yard looking for comfort, and walked him over to the shelter's van. The old lady didn't know she was being recorded during her tantrum, and she tried to accuse me of harassing her and trying to steal her dog. She turned pure white, and she was for once speechless when the police officer informed her that there was video evidence and that she could be charged for threats against minor children, plus animal neglect and abuse. I agreed not to press charges in exchange for her willingly surrendering Tim and never again even thinking of ever saying another word to me, and staying off our property. She agreed. Tim was adopted by a wonderful older retired gentleman who got him the vet care he needed and started him on a special diet. He went on to live his best life. As for the neighbors, it turns out her a-hole son had an arrest warrant out for him, and he just happened to be home when the officers showed up at their house and he was arrested. The old lady ended up selling her house 6 months later because Sonny Boy was in jail and she couldn't afford to keep the house. I ended up buying my rental, and my new neighbors became very good friends. By the way, I didn't have any fears about possible violent retribution from the neighbor's son, as his charges were not violent in nature, and he was a huge coward. And he was also aware that I was a trained weaponry defense expert. The guy left the state after his prison stint. I later hear that he died from alcoholism about 10 years later. He'd abandoned his mother, who ended up in a state-funded nursing home. Guys, to me, OP is a hero in this situation, for not only ridding the neighborhood of an entitled Karen, but helping to rehome good old Timmy boy. And guys, while we're on the subject of police and arrest warrants, listen to this one. So many moons ago, I worked at a now defunct convenience store / gas station in the Midwest. I was initially a bit reticent to take a job at a convenience store because it's just the sort of place you always hear about getting robbed. However, it was new, brightly lit, clean, and on a very busy road. Also, I needed a second job pronto because university is expensive and the girls gotta eat. Ramen and peanut butter only go so far. So after I start working there, I quickly realized that my worries about being robbed were probably unfounded, as my store was somehow the meeting point for all the police. The local city cops, the county sheriff, and even detectives all wandered into my store multiple times a day. They would stand around and chat with staff, or they would stop in for a snack or drink on the way to work. This comes into play later. So while I didn't have to worry about robbers and I kind of enjoyed the job, there was one major annoyance. I got along well with all employees, but one, his name was Branson. Branson was in his early 20s. He's a fairly well-spoken and intelligent guy, but wouldn't you know it, he just knew everything. Since he knew everything, it was obvious that the Lord Almighty had put him on Earth to tell everybody else about everything. No matter what you were talking about, the guy knew more and better than you, even on matters involving your own history. Now, you wouldn't think that was possible, but by God, the guy had an opinion about the cafeteria in the hospital that my mother worked at when I was a child. While he wasn't the first know-it-all I've ever met, he had an even more annoying personality trait. Branson was a tattletale. If you didn't stock the coolers before he got there, he would tattle. If you didn't clean the bathrooms before he came in, the guy would tattle. If you didn't make more coffee, tattle. No matter how minor or downright wrong he was, he just had to run and tell management. As such, they were just as annoyed by him as the lowly cashiers. Once, he almost got me fired by telling the managers that I allowed one of my friends to steal from the store. Luckily, we were absolutely lousy with cameras. So after a few minutes of desperate pleading for the manager to check CCTV footage, they discovered that Branson was in fact full of it, lying for his own amusement. Now, when it was proved he was wrong, did he apologize? Of course not. He was never wrong in all of his livelong days because he, of course, knows everything. I was, as they say, not remotely fond of Branson. So one day, the store was filled with law enforcement as usual. 2 sheriffs and 4 or 5 local city cops. It was shift change, and me and my coworker were ready to hand off our shift to Branson. There were no other customers, so we were all standing around talking and just enjoying the banter. It just so happened that the sheriff supervisor was there, and his name was Bucky. Now, Bucky was a good old boy, salt of the earth, and he was one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. The guy would give you the shirt off his back if he thought you looked a bit chilly. Now, while I was chatting with some other boys in blue, Bucky was talking to Branson. I wasn't entirely listening to their conversation until it started to go a bit pear-shaped. Bucky was talking about something and Branson, in his usual way, just started arguing with him that he was wrong because Branson knew it was X instead of Y. Branson then took it a step further, and he suggested that as a lawman, Bucky did not have the schooling that Branson did, and it was only natural that Branson would know more about the subject. At that, Bucky just smiled, and rather than argue, he removed himself from the conversation. He then walks around the counter to the other side, and he caught my eye and motioned me over. It's at that point he asked me what Branson's last name was, and not seeing any reason not to, I told him. He then thanked me and drifted off into the store. Now honestly, I didn't think anything more about it, and I went back to my conversation with the others. After a few minutes, Bucky walks up with a vaguely puzzled look on his face, and he asks Branson, "Hey buddy, what's your name again?" And Branson, sounding a little annoyed and as if he were schooling a child, answered him. Again, Bucky walks back off into the store. When Bucky returned, he had a big old grin on his face. He then motions Branson to come over to him from behind the counter, and he says to Branson, "You said your name was Branson, last name, right?" Branson confirmed it was, and Bucky's grin widened even further as he reaches for his handcuffs on his belt, and he says to Branson, "I am so happy to hear that because there's a warrant out for your arrest. I'm gonna have to take you in. I'm gonna need you to turn around for me and put your hands behind your back." After that, all the conversation died entirely. I exchanged a well-earned shocked Pikachu face with my coworker. The shocked expressions on our faces melted away into absolute delight as our most annoying coworker was handcuffed and taken out of the store. I never did see Branson again, but Bucky was back later that evening and he apologized to me for making me stay late. I told him I didn't mind, it was all worth it for the show. I would have done it all over again just to see an idiot sabotage himself. And life tip, if you've got a warrant out for your arrest, it's probably best if you don't annoy a cop because he might just take out his own petty revenge. Guys, was that ever freaking satisfying? People like Branson are so annoying. I used to go to school with a kid who was exactly like Branson, except the kid would Google everything mid-conversation and he would go, well, actually, you're so wrong because it's this. And who knows, guys, if Branson didn't annoy the officer to that extent, he might not have had his name run and he'd still be working. My husband passed away 2 years ago. He was a remodeler who had a broad list of clients. For a time, to help out the adult daughter who we'll call Kiki, of my good friend of 42 years, Amy, he would hire her as a helper on some of his larger remodeling projects. During that time, Kiki would occasionally borrow things for her own projects. A portable CD player, a pair of channel locks, a winch and come along, a table saw, chainsaw, paint sprayer, and an air compressor and nail gun. They were all borrowed clean, in working order, in good condition with all relevant parts included. And every single one of them was returned with great delays, all broken, missing significant parts, and a crap ton of excuses. Over 2 years, Kiki managed to cost him nearly $5,000 in losses. Finally, he also quit hiring her as a helper because he caught her stealing from one of his clients. And he forced her to put back the item she took right then and there, and he kicked her off the job immediately. Last September, I was visiting my friend and Kiki was there. And then Kiki hit me up for what she called her promised inheritance, which was the first I ever heard about it. Given that my hubby and I spent the 8 years of his terminal illness talking about what he wanted after death, and given that he gifted things of his that he wanted his friends to have before he died, I knew damn well that he did not intend for Kiki to have anything. My husband had left no will. Her mother knew that my hubby had quit lending her tools after getting the paint sprayer back. She also knew about Kiki's attempted theft, and had caused him to refuse to have her work on anything with him for any reason. Now, our state is a community property state. When a spouse dies without a will, only the surviving spouse inherits. So Amy told her daughter to back off, and I got a bright idea of how I was going to handle getting rid of all that broken stuff, which was still taking room in the back of the tool shed. So I told her I'd be sure to pick something out for her, even though her own behavior was the root cause of bad blood between herself and my husband. So the next day, with Amy's help, I dropped off all the broken tools and the busted up CD player that Kiki borrowed from my hubby at her apartment. Kiki wanted to know what I expected her to do with all of it, and I told her that I expected her to do with them whatever it was that she expected my hubby to do with them after she returned them in the condition they were in. Now she's the proud owner of a bunch of useless tools, and I got to reclaim nearly 35 square feet of space in what's now my tool shed. Ain't that something else, guys? Like, I'm just baffled that Kiki's first instinct when seeing OP after her husband died was to ask what sort of inheritance he left for her. Family, I understand, but that's like me going to my boss when his dad dies saying, hey, what did your dad leave for me? Did he leave me any money? Like, some people are really just in it for themselves, guys. And also, I just want to say that I love the fact that her own mom helped OP dump the stuff there. Like, that's just extra deserved salt in the wound. One evening, I was at my local McDonald's, waiting in line to satisfy my cravings for some real junk food. It was a rather busy night, so the queues were longer than usual. I was standing about 1.5 feet behind the person in front, which is far enough to not invade their personal space, but close enough that I was obviously in the queue. It's at that moment that some smug guy decided that the space in front of me had his name on it. So the guy squeezes himself into the gap, brushing up both against myself and the person in front. And from his body language, I could almost hear himself thinking, what a sucker. Personal space is for losers who want to wait longer for their meal. Now, I have just about as much respect for people who cut in line as those who fart in elevators or demand free stuff because they're social influencers. So I started hatching my plan for petty revenge. Should I tap him on the shoulder and ask him nicely to move to the back? Perhaps berate him loudly to make everyone gawk at him? Or put him in a rear naked choke and go all MMA on him? In the end, I decided that the best revenge was to do nothing. A few minutes later, he finally reaches the front of the line and he begins dictating his order to the McDonald's crew member, at which the crew member says, "I'm sorry sir, but this is the pickup line for those who've ordered. You can place your order in the other queue over there." Guys, this is the perfect example of Napoleon's quote, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." That was perfect instant karma right there. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/PettyRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I hope you didn't shake your heads too hard, and I hope you had a few good laughs. If you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where a Karen demands a brand new iPhone and OP gets her fired. It's such a crazy story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.